Eh? What's that? Yeah, that's right. I am slowly but surely losing my hearing. Can we talk about that? So, as a child, I grew up being fascinated by sounds. It was even to the point where I would lay in bed at night and put my ear down to the mattress and hum into the mattress to make the mattress springs vibrate at their resonant frequency. I tested that out quite a bit. I also spent a lot of time in the woods just listening to everything. It was great. A little bit later on, when I began to play instruments, oh wow, that really opened up a world of sound to me to begin to understand musical languages, as it were, and musical timbre and sounds and textures. The whole thing was just fascinating to me. Later on in my teenage years, and it was actually before I began playing in bands, I began to notice something, an occasional high-pitched, very, very high-pitched buzz in my ears. Not super loud, but loud enough to notice it. And it came and then it went. But it was frequent enough that I did notice it, and it made me wonder, what is that sound? I don't really know what that is. It didn't bother me or affect my ability to play musical instruments or hear the sounds that I wanted to hear, but I just kind of always knew it was there. Later on, when I was in my 20s and playing in a band, I began to notice that high-pitched buzz more often. And I learned that it was called tinnitus or tinnitus, depending on your preferred pronunciation. And I read up a little bit about it and went, oh, wow, maybe I should protect my hearing a little bit more. So I began to wear earplugs in my ears during band rehearsal, and I wore them, even though I thought it looked kind of stupid, I wore them at shows that we played. Fast forward ahead several years, I'd gotten married, and my wife and I began to have a family that were raising kids. And I think you guys know this. I couldn't play in bands anymore. It's just too much. So I stopped and I thought, well, maybe I made it okay with my hearing. The high-pitched buzz still wasn't so bad, but it was a lot more prevalent. It was there more often than not. But I thought, okay, I'm not playing a band anymore. Should be good. Fast forward ahead several more years, I'm now in my 40s, and at some point I came to the realization that high-pitched buzz was there all the time. It still was not holding me back from hearing any sounds or doing what I wanted to do with music, but it was always there. I began to get concerned. So I went to see an audiologist and had the hearing test thing done. And you know what? My hearing results came back normal for a male my age, so this would have been when I was in my mid-40s. And I was really happy about that, although the high-pitched sound was still annoying. That tinnitus there wasn't annoying enough to hold me back. I still could hear up above 15 kilohertz, and I thought, well, that's not so bad, is it? I can still mix audio and hear the upper, kind of the upper frequency range and make sure that everything sounds balanced. So not so bad. Fast forward ahead several more years, actually a bunch more years, more than a decade, and you would have found me ramping up my audio recording. I'm beginning to record albums as Chords of Orion. I started my YouTube channel, and I'm just having a blast. But my constant companion was that high-pitched buzz. Mr. Tinnitus was always there with me, and I had to admit 5-6 years ago that it was louder than before. And what I have found over the last 5 or 6 years that I've been doing Chords of Orion and this YouTube channel is that every year, even though I'm trying to be really careful with my hearing, I'm not doing anything loud. Every year, that tinnitus or tinnitus is getting just a little incrementally louder. So that's where I am today. I've got Mr. Tinnitus there. It's a very high-pitched buzz. I've actually checked it out. It's a very high C sharp. I don't recall the octave, 4 or 5 or 6, whichever octave it is, but it's really high up there. And, I can still play music, still play my guitar, still record, still mix and master, but I'm beginning to see some issues that I'm having to deal with. And that is in that upper frequency range. Legitimately now that, it's a number of years since I had that, a decade and a half since I had that audiologist test. My frequency range, as far as informal testing is I'm probably topping out at between 12 and 13K at this point. The big problem is that high-pitched buzz, the tinnitus, lives up around that area. So what happens from time to time is that the tinnitus masks what I'm trying to do, what I'm trying to listen to musically. And this comes into play mostly when I'm mixing or mastering a YouTube video or a song for an album. There's been a couple I think I've done okay. I've got some coping mechanisms that I'll tell you about in a minute, but there's been a couple of times when I've messed up, in particular on the YouTube videos, and people have commented and said, Bill, there's some weird high-pitched sound going on. And after I went back to check, I realized they're right. I missed it because I couldn't hear it. So what am I doing to kind of get around my ear limitation? A couple of things. I don't typically monitor very loud. I try to stay at about 70, 75 decibels or less. But when I'm mixing and when I'm concerned about hearing that high end, I will, for short periods of time, crank the volume up on my studio monitors kind of high. I don't know exactly how high, but kind of high. And you'll see me kind of going, what's going on out of that tweeter? And if I do that, I can generally kind of get a sense of what's going on pretty well. I also wear headphones. I've got 2 pairs of pretty good Sennheiser headphones, and I also monitor on those headphones for short periods of time at a louder volume, not crazy loud, but louder volume to make sure that I'm kind of hearing what's going on. And the other thing I'm doing when mixing and mastering is I'm using my eyes. I pull up the frequency analyzer in my recording software so I can see, kind of the frequency line of the audio, and I'm looking for problems. I'm visually looking for problems in that upper end of the frequency, round about 12, 13, maybe 15K. And if I see any spikes, I know I've got to deal with something. So perhaps the question you're thinking of asking me is, Bill, do you find this situation depressing? And I have to admit, yeah, it is a little depressing. But I've learned a few lessons through this. And one is I'm now viewing my hearing as a finite resource, one of the finite resources of my life, and it's up to me to decide how to expend that finite resource. So I'm trying to focus on music. It's really kind of enthused me even more to create and get the music out before the finite resource is gone, or before the finite resource degrades to the point where I can't do what I'm doing now. So my hope is that I can do this for another 10 years. Another 10 years. We'll see. I've got a backup plan, though. So my hope is that if I'm able to do this for another 10 years, I'm generating some revenue off the channel now, nothing bigger to speak of, but my hope is that I can continue to grow that. And by the time I can't hear well enough to mix or master music, I'll be able to hire someone to mix and master it for me. I don't have the budget right now, but maybe I'll have the budget later. That's my hope. So that's my story. My big question for you is, do you have a story? Have you struggled with physical limitations that might affect or could affect your ability to make music? Are you struggling with it? Have you overcome the physical limitation? Drop a comment below and let me know. Let's get a conversation going around this topic. I think it's really important that no matter what our physical limitations are, that if we're musicians and we're serious about making music, that we try to find ways around our physical limitations to continue to produce the art that is coming out of our souls. All right, I've got a playlist here of some related topics I think you'll be interested in. Also, if you have not yet subscribed to Chords of Orion here, go ahead and do it and hit that bell notification. See all of you on the next video.